Welcome to the Vigor Life Podcast, a source of inspiration, lessons, stories, skill sets, mindsets, and strategies to invigorate and expand all areas of your life. Let's go. Hey, what's going on? Coach Luka back here with the Vigor Life Podcast. And today's episode is actually going to be about something that, I don't know, I talk about quite a bit, but I got asked this. I get asked this every time I speak. I get asked this a lot of time through email. And it just came up 2 days ago. I said, you know what? I'm going to do an episode about building relationships. And, this to me is like, I talk about these two a lot, right? Relationships and experiences, about how not only important they are, but if you think about it, I mean, those are two of the things that essentially enhance your life extremely. Like, you take those two away and then, what do you really have? I mean, what do you really have without relationships, right? I mean, we are social creatures, and if you have every material thing on the planet and whatever success means to you, but you take away other human beings that you love, care about, connect with, and inspire you, then what do you really have? Right? Not much. But, and I'll say this, right? When you put one and one together, it equals three, right? If you have great experiences with the quality relationships in your life, that means, that's the best it can be. Like, when I look back in my life, and I think about, like, what are the things that I remember? What are the things that are really embedded in, kind of my nervous system and my memory because they were so important. And, majority of them are like, time I spent with family, friends, mentors, and whether that was like an incredibly great, happy experience or whether it was struggle and suffering. I'd have you consider that a lot of life, some of your best moments when you look back were the biggest struggles in your life. So with that said, that's why, like, for me, like, being part of teams and when I played sports, a lot of it was, suffering, like training. It was really tough training sessions, 5-6 hours a day and crazy conditioning and whatnot. But, like, at the end of it, like, you bond and you come together, and, like, those are the things that I still remember. Other things I remember is, the amount, like, when you put in crazy work into certain projects that end up coming true. Things I remember is, like, giving to people, philanthropy and putting a smile on other people's faces. And the reason why I'm talking about this, because it's so important. And I think that fear a lot of times prevents people from connecting with others. It prevents people from getting to know others that, like, they want to be like, or they inspire them, or just, whether, like I said, it's a girl or boy, and it's kind of like you want to get them on a date, become their friend, whatever it may be, right? So a couple of, I'm going to kind of take you back a little bit through, because the question that comes up is like, hey, Luka, so many people, and, how did you create these connections? Like, how did you get to know so many people? And, first I'm going to just, like I said, talk about it kind of, I would say off of memory and just off the top of my head. And then I actually got some notes. I'm not going to be hiding these notes, but, like, sometimes, man, there's so much stuff going on through my head. I'm like, I got to organize the notes to give you, like, 15 different pointers that I think are incredibly important in, like, making connections. Right. But I'll start off with this, over a decade ago, I think that when you have a virtue, when you have a value, that's curiosity. And I'll say that's definitely one of the values that I have. It is always seeking out, like, knowledge, information, relationships, right? Over 10 years ago, I was still playing pro basketball, and I was just studying. Like, I was studying everything I could have my hands on strength and conditioning, performance, speed, like, you name it. Actually, from the age of, like, 16, 17, I've been just completely kind of somewhat obsessed with it. And so I would travel. Like, I remember going to, this has to be at least a decade ago, but, like, I traveled to Newcastle, England. I flew out to London, took a train to Newcastle, still playing ball, like, and I went to an Eric Cressy and Nick Rantham seminar. It was a performance seminar. I can't remember what it was on. And I came probably from the furthest away of anybody there. Bought all the products, took Eric to lunch, and kind of got to know him. And from there, we kind of started communicating. And that kind of started that relationship. And every single seminar that I would go to, I would try to meet as many people as possible, and start communicating. And what's one of the best forms of communication is saying that, and not obviously making it up, but like if you bought a product, you read their book, you read a blog post or took a course or something like that, or came to see them speak, and just coming up and going like, hey, really loved your book, loved your talk. It was awesome. There's these points that you said in there, and in asking questions and being interested and intrigued in what they do. That's one of the biggest things. Like, I know if somebody comes up to me and lets me know that they love something that I did. Look, we're all humans, right? It makes you feel good. And I'll spend any amount of time just, kind of like talking to people, getting to connect with them. And every single person kind of has that. But, you can't, and I'll touch this in the 15 points a little bit later. Like, you can't, without risk, you can't create any relationship, right? I think that sometimes is the whole fear of like all judgment, like persecution, whatever, where, everybody's just human, and building that connection is important. But what's even more important is, if somebody does take the time, there's a lot of great people who just take the time, talk to you, give you value, connect. I think what's more important is than the initial conversation and connection is the follow-up, right? The follow-up as far as what you do later. And I used to do, and I still do this, where, I'd send thank you cards and a gift, whether it was a book, a gift card, and just thanking the person like, hey, I appreciate you taking the time out, to answer my questions, connect, whatnot. Like, let me know if you're doing another seminar, wherever, like I'll come out. Right. So one, if you invest money into somebody's craft, there's kind of respect there in a certain sense. Like, I appreciate and I'm grateful for every single person, one that like listens to this podcast, that comes to Vigor Ground, that, is invested in coaching, come to a seminar, or see me speak, whatever it may be. I truly am grateful for it. And, part of like showing that appreciation and gratuity is in communicate, like taking the time to get to know people. Right. So I think that's what's very, very important is doing that, and also being prepared. Right. Like, now when I go places and I could, probably connect to majority of people through someone I know, I still do my due diligence. Right. I prepare. So if I'm going to see somebody speak, if I'm going to a seminar, if I'm going to somebody's gym, if somebody's coming here to talk, like, I will do my due diligence. Like, I'm going to read about them, see what they're doing, dig a little deeper, see the things that they like. And that's absolutely not in a creepy way, but, one, it makes you prepared. Two, you're able to get to know them better and ask the right questions. You're able to create more rapport because you actually know certain things that they're interested in, right? It's just preparation. It's just like anything else. Like, because when I talk about building relationships, I'm talking also about like, how do you go about building a business relationship, right? You want to be able to know about that other person, because the person appreciates if you've done your research and you're not just coming here with a blank stare. Like, hey, like, I want to make a collaboration, and you haven't even put in the work to find out what their business is about, what their values are, what they love to do, like how many employees, like all of that stuff. There's nothing worse than when somebody comes and I'm going to bring this one up, like, just wants to pick your brain. Say, hey, can I pick your brain? That's the worst. But it's also, if somebody's communicating with me, like a couple of weeks ago, somebody came in and they wanted to, it was financial planning and some of it was like insurance for the team and things like that. And they were clueless, like they walked in and started talking to me, and I was talking back, and like some of the questions that they were asking me just showed that they had no idea what this business is about, what we do, who we serve, like what are we known for in the community. Like, it would have taken 10 to 15 minutes to like Google and, check the social media out and take some notes, and you would have plenty of talking points. And I would have been kind of surprised in a positive way that this person took the time to do the research, right? You just don't see this anymore, where like, people are just going in blind. And, it's kind of the same thing. Like, would you go to, a seminar and talk about something without being prepared for it? Now, if you're expert level status, you should be able to talk about a lot of shit nonstop without that. But man, if you want to, go to TED Talks, you're going to come to TED Talk. Like, some of the smartest people in the world came to TED Talks. Man, they're preparing for months for that, right? Because if they didn't, it's not going to be great. And then you're not going to make the impact that you want to make, right? So same thing is like when you're having meetings and building relationships, is like, do your due diligence, like be prepared. make sure you're following up. Like I said, relationships are built not on the initial connection, but on the follow-up, the continuing communication, right? And so like this brings me to one thing that's really cool, and it's gonna relate to this conversation, but it's also gonna relate to some other conversations in business, and it's called the likability formula. It's called a like formula, right? So essentially, the like formula goes like this. For somebody to like you, it equals proximity plus frequency plus duration plus intensity, right? It's likability formula. So just to kind of break that down, so I'm not just being like super, geeky on this stuff. So proximity just means, how close you are to someone. Like even, you've heard Tony Robbins talk about this, right? If you're just literally not communicating, but you're close to someone, that's proximity. And if you go, like for instance, if you walk in a park and you're walking around that same person, right? Like because you're walking your dog, they're walking their dog, or she's walking her dog, you feel me? Then, you're constantly seeing them. Guess what? Like that person actually like starts getting to like you, even though they don't know you, but there's proximity there. It's a lot easier. You see them for the 30th time, like, hey, how are you doing? I always see you walking your dog here, right? It's not going to be awkward because that proximity was there, right? Then there's the frequency, and that's what I just mentioned. Like, hey, do you see them once a year? Are you in proximity once a year, or is it every week, every day, every whatever? The more I would say frequency there is, the bigger chance of there is the likability. Okay, and then there's duration. How long are you spending time with them? Like I said, it could be at work. You're in proximity next to the person next to you, for long periods of time and frequently. Now, if you're a dick, obviously this goes the other direction, and that would be the unlikability formula. Maybe I need to write that book. That maybe I don't think anybody buy that shit. But and then there's intensity. Now, intensity is, how deep do we go with that person? And this is where, if you've seen, like, for instance, surface-like conversations, is that really going to connect to people? Probably not. Over time, obviously, you seeing them more frequently, that can happen. But like the deeper you go, the more intensity there is. And I'll give you an example, right? When I went to my first Warrior Week in the Wake Up Warrior movement, and I was in that group with, I didn't know any of the guys in that group, right? We were together for 4 or 5 days, going through some really, really hardcore experiences, both physically, emotionally, mentally, right? We went deep. Okay, so there was a crazy intensity. We were sharing a lot, right? So in that week, there was a lot of proximity. Duration was all day long, and there was a ton of intensity. So literally in that short time frame, we got to know each other and like each other a lot, even though, like I said, it was only 4 days. But the intensity was crazy, because look, when you're sharing things about, divorce and me being in organized crime and my divorce and all the dumb shit I did in my life and all the things that, the guilt and the shame and the blame and you name it, right? Like that's intensity, versus like, oh man, how about them Seahawks? So you now kind of start seeing this formula that really allows you to see like, oh man, how does somebody get to like you, right? There's a lot of like science behind it. But at the end of the day, how you show up matters a ton, right? So if you show up faking the funk all the time or trying to be somebody you're not and things like that, that formula doesn't just work like that. But it is important to understand that, like, what, why do I believe? And just real quick, proximity, because we're connected by social media and digital stuff. If I'm talking to somebody on FaceTime or on Skype, that actually counts. It's not this, it's obviously not the same as somebody being physically, in your presence. But it still does count. Like, if you're talking to someone, texting with somebody daily, that still is frequency, right? And there is some, I would say, proximity and communication there. It's just not the same. And it's also the reason why, and like I said, I'm starting this, like, I think there's going to be a groundbreaking online coaching program because of the software and everything we're doing to reach, thousands of people versus just the people in the gym. But at the end of the day, I always will believe that in the gym, like physically, you can create the best connection, the biggest change, the biggest transformations because of how like the intensity, proximity, the frequency, the duration that you're able to create in that. So think about that formula. It can be used for good or evil. I'm here saying use it for good, but it's also, there's a lot of like tricks to the trade, and maybe we'll do a show just on that, right? Like how making eye contact and how to make it and not, and all this cool stuff. But I do think that's important because like all of the things that I just mentioned, like let me go back and say that like all the people that I built relationship with, I stayed in touch. In the last, I don't know, like let's say 10 years, I'm not exaggerating if I say I've been to probably, 150 to 200 seminars or conferences, like physically there, and so I've had a lot of opportunity, and then I stay after, do lunch, breakfast, invite people to dinner for a drink or whatever. So there was the frequency, I try to make the duration as much as possible. As I got to know people, the intensity becomes deeper in the conversations. So now you can see like how you can develop relationships, and always there's got to be this whole like value thing. And okay, so we're gonna dig deep now because I noticed that I'm mentioning a lot of things that I have on my list here, but and I'm gonna cover some of these and go into detail a little more or less depending on which one it is, but I think this will help you out with building relationships, whether it's personal or business. Okay, and to me, honestly, it's like there's kind of like this gelling of stuff. And a couple weeks ago, I was out in Denver with Adam Bornstein. We're building something really really cool, and I hired him on for some consulting and actually just collabo work. And he's a good friend of mine. We were just talking about how like real kind of like when you're truly in flow and happy, like work and kind of relationships and having fun, all these things that gel sometimes. It's not like there's a hard end to it. It's almost like how the muscle goes into a tendon. You don't know where the beginning and end is. Like nobody really knows. The doctor doesn't know. It just gels one into another. And I believe that like when you love what you do, you're with people that you love, and you're creating and collaborating, and like it really kind of ends up being this like jazz, right? It's just you don't know where it starts or begins. And so with that said, I'm going to go into to these points of, creating connections. Number one, I have be friendly first. Like, look, you can't expect people to wait. And two, like nobody like, so, let's be real. Like nobody likes to be around people that are sour and have negative auras. That's just the reality, and me and one of my best friends in the world, Jay Ferrugia, were talking about this, the other day. It's tough, like when you go to places, and like we had this experience at one of the events in Denver in 212, where you say hi to someone, like, hey, how you doing? Like, obviously with kind of like this I'm excited to see you voice, and other person's like, hey, it doesn't even look at you, doesn't even know it's you. Like, man, like that, you're not probably gonna want to talk to that person, right? So that whole be friendly first is important. It doesn't mean like there's the overly friendly, which other people don't want to do either, but just being friendly, just being nice. Like number two is project yourself with an image that breeds confidence. Now, what I'll say here is like, look, in sales and just in life, and remember that we're always kind of selling, right? Like, I mean, if you're talking to your girlfriend, she wants to have a burger, you want to have pizza, somebody's got to sell somebody else. So when I say sales, don't take this as the wrong way. But certainty sells. And when you meet people, if you exude confidence, like this is a great thing. Now there's a difference between confidence and arrogance, right? And I think that I'm hoping that you obviously know the difference, right? Confidence is just you have certainty in yourself, or like if you're discussing like a business transaction, like certainty in what you do and your vision, and certainty sells. Like without it, like you could have a great idea and just be like, well, I got this thing and I was thinking about like that, that in itself doesn't breed certainty. And people want to follow people that are certain about like where they're going, right? So that's very, very important. It's like exuding confidence. Exuding a self-image that breeds confidence. Number three is looking people in the eyes, like, and that shows self-respect. Like this is huge, when I'm saying these, like at some point in time, like I didn't do certain of these things, and So I'm not here sitting like, hey, like right from the get-go, I got this down. Like, no, it's been a decade, 2 decades in development. So, but I'm always like weary about when I'm looking somebody in the eyes and they can't look in the eyes. It doesn't make them a bad person, but it does mean that a lot of times, they don't have it's either don't have self-respect or respect for you. But most of the time, it's like, if you don't respect yourself, it's hard to respect others too. So that's a very, very important thing. And I'll let you guys know an experience that once again, years ago I had in Warrior, and somebody was telling a story on the background. I know Tony Robbins does this too, of looking another man in the eye, and through this whole story, like this is a 6-minute experience, and it was amazing, right? At first, it just felt awkward because it's like, okay, I'm going to stare another guy in the eyes for like a really, really long period of time, and you go through this emotional roller coaster, and eyes can tell a story, they can tell emotions, and it was incredible because at first it's like it's awkward. Then, and then because it's awkward, you try to laugh off stuff. So some people are laughing and stuff, and then you get really serious. And at the end, it just got emotional. Obviously, there was a story connected to it too. But man, like, I mean, there was a humongous bonding between like having that connection, looking somebody in the eyes for a long period of time. And I'd have you consider that it's a huge factor. If you're having a conversation, looking someone in the eye, there's truth, there's respect. And also there's attention, and that's a big thing that goes behind it. Positive attitude brings positive responses and positive results. I'm going to break this down though, because like I'm not a big like it. When I say bring a positive attitude, like it's because nobody likes a negative Nancy, right? Like right, if you're in a conversation, somebody's always complaining. It's the thing that can completely kind of detract you from. I'm like, oh shit, like. I don't know, this is just completely negative. Now, when I say, being positive, I don't like if things are going shitty in your life, I like truth. And, we'll get to the last one where we'll talk about being real, being yourself. And we talked about that whole intensity. And I think, you have to be able to make a judgment call on if you just got to know someone and just you unload them with you're like, oh man, I'm just going through the shitter and just, it's coming out of rehab and maybe that's not the right time. But I do feel that like when you can truly get to connect with people is when you're also vulnerable. So, you can be vulnerable and you can talk about, negative experiences or struggles that you're having and not be a victim and not be like the negative Nancy, right? But, remember like people that talk about ideas and possibilities are usually the people that you want to connect to, right? If you're talking to people that are talking about other people and events, not so much, right? And that's where this really comes from, is like that positivity breeds positivity. Like, and as much as, I'm not completely on the side of positive psychology when you're not acknowledging shitty times. I think that's, I think you got to acknowledge when times are tough. I think you can't, people that are constantly always positive, I question it because you're suppressing. Like everybody goes through shit. Everybody goes through struggle. Everybody goes through negative stuff. And if you suppress that, like that's not, that is, I always go like, that's not a good thing, right? There's all types of sedation. That's one of them. But, when you're meeting and connecting with people, like you want to be the positive person, like it talks about possibilities, right? And ideas. And 5 is like no connection is made without some form of risk. And all that means is like, look, if you're trying to meet people, like you might have to go out of your way. I mean, number one, what's risk? Like in this day and age, let's be honest, like we're all like people are scared of judgment, persecution, and rejection, right? So like even going to like, I'm gonna put this into a girl boy scenario because I think this is gonna be the easiest for to see is like, why does a guy not go up to a girl and ask her out or ask her to go on a coffee? Well, because it's the fear of rejection. Right? It's like you'd rather not go out with them than be rejected, right? So connecting, there's always a risk, right? There's always a risk of no. There's always a risk of being shot down. There's always a risk of making a fool of yourself, but the thing is like, if you don't take that risk, like even if you do make a fool of yourself and you fail and whatever, right? Just as a learning process, a stepping stone. And as long as you keep doing it, you keep getting better at it and you figure out, okay, that's not the way to go about it, right? You figure out the better way. But connecting is risking. Like I'll tell you this. I can't tell you how many thousands of emails I've probably sent out that I never got a response to, how many calls I've made I never got a response to. I can't tell you how many no's I got. Like, nope, I don't give a shit, not meeting with you. Like, and some were like very negative. Like I've been, I've had some really negative experiences trying to connect with people. And if I stopped because of that, I wouldn't have built the relationships that I have over time. And some of these relationships like literally, took off after 3 years, 4 years, 5 years of communicating and seeing each other and so on and so forth. So just remember, like, without risk, there's nothing. I mean, there's nothing that can happen. Number 6 is show up prepared. I talked about this before. And like I said, look, it's just like people are just, as soon as you meet someone and if they're like, oh man, I love your work. I listened to your last podcast, it was excellent. Like the thing that you talk, when you talked about and you go in detail, I'm automatically like, oh, okay, this person actually listens to my stuff. There's somebody that appreciates what I'm doing. Like instantly there is rapport, there's connection. Come prepared. And my best example here is like, look, if somebody, how anxious or stressed out would you be if somebody was like, look, and I need you to go up on stage and talk about car engines. Now, look, I know I love cars. I don't know shit about car engines, right? So if I was in front of like people that know all about that stuff and I had to do it today, I would be like, man, you're frozen, right? Like I couldn't do anything. Now, if they give you 2 weeks and they go like, in 2 weeks you're going to be on stage and talk about car engines. Well, if you don't prep for it, it's going to be the same thing. You're going to freak out. You probably won't even show up. Now, but if for 2 weeks every day for 5 hours you study car engines, you pull up, you buy a book on it, you get a course on it, you're spending like I said, 100 hours in those 2 weeks getting prepared for speaking. Now, you may still be a little freaked out, but guess what? You're prepared. You got the slides ready. You got it all mapped out. You went over it like 10 different times, whatnot, right? Same thing with the building relationships, man. Like if you read a book from the person that you're meeting or you listen to their podcast or, you've been to their gym or you just did a little bit of research and showed up prepared. One, like it alleviates your anxiety somewhat and you can have conversations about things that matter to them, which create rapport, which then opens up the door to obviously having a deeper conversation. And we just talked about how important that is and the whole likability formula, right? So number 7 is don't focus on your motive to meet. Like this is huge, right? Because the thing I hate is like when somebody shows up and right from the get-go, I see that it's like there's one thing that is like, I want to get this result. I want to sell you on something or whatnot. And I can feel it every part of the conversation, right? The best conversation, the best relationships are when you just lose yourself and you start talking about everything else. And it doesn't feel like the other person wants to get something out of you. Honestly, like, we're going to talk about this in a second about delivering value to that person. But that's huge. So like not showing and not having that motive for it, right? Number 8 is take genuine interest in people. Here's one of my favorite quotes, right? To be interesting, you have to be interested. And I got that first time from Martin Rooney, like probably a decade ago. And here's the thing, right? If in this day and age, like most people walk around and like, they're talked at. Like when you talk, other people just wait for you to stop talking so they can talk. And when you're truly interested in someone, it means asking questions. I think one of the most powerful things in the world is asking questions and having a huge kind of toolbox of questions to ask people, because when you do, they're going to let go and be like, wow, like they're actually interested in what I have to say or my thoughts or my emotions or whatever it may be. And, even in sales, we talk about, hey, like let the other person talk so you can really get to know their struggles, their frustrations, their desires, their fears, their wants, right? But it's the same thing in this where we have to be interested and like not just like truly be interested, right? Empathetic, compassionate, like hearing them, right? Not just listening, but like hearing them. And so that's hugely important. Number 9, find something in common. And notice how this is going to connect because, when you find something in common, barriers disappear. And guess what? If you get prepared and get to know about the person, about the company, about the product, about whatever, then you can have a conversation and you can basically find rapport, right? You can create rapport and those barriers start disappearing. If you come completely unprepared, now, yeah, you could still ask a lot of questions and dig into that. But regardless, much easier to do if you come prepared. Number 10. Like the higher up you go, the more cautious people get. Now, and this is pretty I would say, like normal, right? To know that the more famous people are, the more successful or whatever you want to say, right? The higher, the harder it is to get to them, the more cautious they get, because they're probably getting people constantly badgering them about wanting something from them, right? So when people are cautious, like this is, I think, where number one, you have to be even more prepared, right? You have to be creative. You have to give a ton of value. You have to show that you're going to go the extra mile to meet them. And you know what I say is that, like, the higher up you go, I think that building powerful relationships opens up the door to introductions for other powerful relationships. So now you can start seeing how this all gels together. And like I said, today's conversation is both in, I would say business and personal, because building relationships goes both ways and it gels. Number 11, your projected image determines your ability to make a connection. Now, as much as I hate to say it, right? Like, people do judge you by, I would say, somewhat first impressions. Or I say this, right? Like, I don't think first impressions are enough at all, but they do open up the door for even a second impression. And so it matters, depending on, where you go, how you show up, how you're dressed. Like I said, if the occasion calls for it, like, that may be what allows you to, to be seen in a certain light. And although I care, obviously I care about people's, where's their heart at? Right? I kind of love that analogy. I judge people by where their heart is at, but sometimes that can happen unless you have more meetings, unless you get closer to somebody to get to know you more, right? So number 12 is give people judge by your actions. So give a first class performance. Not if that, like I said, if it was any type of meeting, give a first class performance. But remember that, like, people say a lot of stuff, but what they do is what you get judged by, at least to me. So if you say, like, hey, you know what, I'm a really kind, generous guy, like, and then I see you walking up to a restaurant and there's an old lady in front of you, don't open her door, I'm starting to get suspect, right? Like, if a waiter was did a great job, like, served great, was fun, was, really kind of like in tune with your needs and stuff, and you don't leave a tip, red flags. Okay, like, these are all the different, like, just little things, right? But in business, the same thing. Did you do what you said you do? Do you show up on time? Do you follow through? Do you over deliver? Do you listen? Are you compassionate? Like, when I think about coaches and building teams, like, these are all very important things. And just remember, you're judged by your actions, right? And we'll talk about another show, like, your actions are always going to be in line with what you value. Maybe not consciously, but subconsciously, right? And but that's important, right? Because, like I said, if you just want to get to the deal and not get to know the person, then you're probably valuing, money or, like, material things, versus the relationship and delivering value to somebody else. Which, number 13, we go provide value. And this is a huge thing. What I started doing, okay, so first of all, providing value can be a lot of different things. It doesn't have to be monetary. It could be, like I said, relationships and experiences. So meaning, providing value is like, if you take somebody out for coffee, you pay for the coffee, you have a great talk, you give the person some ideas on first finding out what they're trying to do, where they want to go, where they're at, and then giving them some ideas, providing the value. Maybe you're giving them a book. I love that. Like, when people have, like, oh, I'm trying to do this or that, this is what I'm struggling with. I have, like, a Rolodex of books in my head. I've read over 1,000 now, and I'm like, and I will literally go buy it and ship it to them or give it to them the next time we meet, because I'm like, hey, I think you're really gonna find some value here. And sometimes I actually give my book and get a new one that was marked up. So done all those different things, but like I said, sitting down for a conversation, helping somebody break through something, delivering value. And after I meet now with people, not just for the first time, but in general, what I do on the back of cards, I actually write, like, what is something that I can help them with? Who is a person I can connect them with? What is a product that might help them out? I'll literally write it in bullet points, because like it gets crazy, and my days are crazy, and I meet a lot of people, I talk to a lot of people, and if I leave that, and it's easy for me to forget things like that. So on the back, I might take a note of like, it's always going to be how I can help that person, right? It's not going to be like, oh, this is what I can get out of that person, right? It's going to be like, how can I help them? Who can I connect them with? What product and service can I recommend to them? What big book can I give them? What idea can I give them? And this brings me to, this is a huge reminder. So James Altucher's book, Choose Yourself, had this great thing. He has a habit where he writes 10 ideas per day, right? To start really creating the habit of generating ideas. And I was listening to one of Jay Ferrucci's podcasts that reminded me that. So I started putting in my phone, started writing out ideas. And a great habit is that you write out ideas for yourself, but then you start writing out ideas for others, right? So if they have a business, they have this, they have that, and you're like, what are 10 ideas for that person that you could think, hey man, I really think you could write this book or do this product, or I think you should reach out to this person. You guys will get along great and collabo. I think we should go and do this seminar or trip. But here's the thing is it makes you think, it makes you come up with ideas, not for just yourself, but for somebody else and for different industries. And guess what? Like your brain starts getting better at it, right? Because it starts creating synapses to connect things. Like this is how we work. So, with that whole delivering value, I hope like that's a habit that you can start doing daily. And maybe 10 is a lot. Maybe you can start doing 5. But what really kind of inspired me to do that was not just generating ideas for myself, was actually generating ideas for others, because I know I can help them deliver a lot of value, right? And so that was a huge one. And that was number 13. Number 14 is transfer your message with excellent communication skills. Now, this is my pitch to you for getting really good at communicating, knowing how to tell stories really well. So like I went through all the books of TED Talks. I went through courses on communication skills, how to listen, how to talk, how to shut, like all these different things, because you can have great ideas and you can care and you can love and you can do all these different things. But if you can't communicate that message, it gets lost. It gets lost in the white noise. And the better of a communicator you are, the better of a storyteller you are, the better that it comes, the energy like runs through you. Guess what? The more you can influence and persuade people in a positive direction, and the better the connection that you can make. I legitimately think that until the day that you die, you cannot get too good at communicating. Like, I don't care what you've done. I don't care if you went to school for communications, you read 100 books. Like it doesn't matter. Like, you can always continue to get better at communication. And part of communication is listening, right? Active listening. Like I said, hearing people out, being great at questions, tonality, right? Like taking people through a journey, storytelling, like all these things are parts of communication. And I have you consider it's one of the most important things in the world that you can get good at and great at. I say get great at and master. And you should never stop doing it. Number 15 is something I mentioned earlier, and it says staying in touch is more important than making the first connection. So do you stay in touch, right? Because remember how we said that likability formula connects back to that, right? It connects back to that likability formula. And like I said, like, so what if you met somebody, you made a great first impression, doesn't matter, right? You don't stay in touch, 4 years later, it's like, hey, I remember when you met, can you do me a favor? Like, no, like it's not going to work, right? So staying in touch and being consistent with it, and it's very important. Now, the deeper the connection you have, like you don't have to stay in touch as much, but it is important to build that relationship, right? Be ready. Number 16 is be ready every day, right? Be ready every day. And what I mean by that is like you got to constantly work on yourself, and like every day is an opportunity to meet people, to connect with people. And so one of the things I'm gonna kind of break down once again, like Jay inspired me to kind of do this. Like if I go to get a coffee, if I go to the store, anything that happens throughout the day, I really make a conscious effort if somebody did something to congratulate. I like to say, man, I really appreciate what you just did there. And I'll just give you an example. I was in Santa Monica and ended up getting a haircut. And this lady was, cutting my hair, and like, she, like, I'm not joking when I say I got the best scalp and face massage of all time. It was like I could have fell asleep there. It was like out of this world. And 10 minutes before it was over, I'm like, man, I can't forget to tell this lady, like, man, how great of a job she did with that, and essentially I did it then. I was like, hey, like, man, you pay so much attention to detail, and that was, you literally like took care of my face better than anyone else. And Like she appreciated it so much. And like, there's two things that happen there. One, you make them feel good. And two, because you reward a behavior, she's going to do more of that behavior. It's going to help her out. But more than anything is just like shining a light on things that people do great. And so to me, that's being ready. Like always being ready to connect, always being ready to communicate. And every single day is an opportunity to become a better communicator that you can then use, when you have bigger meetings and things like that. Number 17 is your reputation determines your future fate. I would say even more so your character. I think reputation is kind of like, I think Eric Thomas was talking about this. Your reputation is, the tree is character. And then depending on how you shine the light on that tree determines your reputation, and sometimes the light that's shown on the tree is like your own thoughts. So you could be talking bad about yourself and, essentially think that your reputation is a certain way. But your character is just like your values, is what you do. Like, we talk about actions. So as long as you keep your character in check, sometimes you might have a bad reputation with a certain group of people and, you can't influence that. Like you literally can't influence it, right? Because maybe somebody that's hating on you that just, your competitor, somebody that is jealous of your success or whatever it may be, goes and tells people that you're a dick or lies about you or whatever, right? They're shining a light on that tree, but from it's like you can't influence that. So that was somebody else's doing, and that's external. But like what you can influence is your character, and your character is the things that you stand for, the things you stand against. The actions that you do that show and confirm your values, and those are the things that like precede you. Like even when you fuck things up in life, and like trust me, I've fucked up more than I can imagine. But I just can't you get back on track and you work on your character, because like I said, it will precede you in. And unfortunately, you may not get a meeting or you may not get a connection because, like I said, if you have a character / reputation that's whatever negative, right, then you might not have that opportunity. And so this is important. What it boils down to is like, your virtues and how like what you give a fuck about. Like I just read this book and it's fantastic, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. And he talks about like you have a finite amount of fucks in your life, and so like you have to really choose what you give a fuck about. Like relationships, family, your vision, your career, like how all of these different things. Like if you give a fuck about material things and like what people think about you, because remember, if you give a fuck about what people think about you, that's external. Like you could be doing great things in your life and people will still think that you're arrogant, whatever, right? But you can control your behaviors, which end up becoming your character, right? So really what I'm coming down to is like all that matters if somebody followed with a camera and you didn't know, like they'd see the life you live. Doesn't matter what you put on social media, doesn't matter what you said, it doesn't matter whatever, like they just see how you live, right? And that's your character. And I would say, that precedes you. And the last one is 17 and a half. And I'll say this because like this is somewhat coming from Jeffrey Gitomer's The Black Book of Connections, which is an excellent book. That and Keith Ferrazzi's You'll Never Eat Alone are two of the best books when it comes to creating connections and building relationships. And he likes to do a half. So this is 7.5. It's just be real, be yourself, and in Warrior, like living the code means be real, be raw, be relevant. And I think that's done more for me in the last couple of years, is just like being vulnerable, sharing struggles, sharing pain, being relevant, how it relates to other people. And then, also like committed to results, like not just being a whining person, but like creating a lesson of how this can help you move forward, right? But I think that there's an aura around people that are transparent. It's like pretty easy to read. I think that down the line, people will figure out that you're faking the funk, you're not being yourself, or any of that. And that takes peeling your own onion, right? Constantly figuring out the deeper layers of who you are, why you do the things that you do. And this is a never-ending process, right? So much of this is wrapped around self-development as you become a better human being, and you will attract who you are more of, especially if you're completely real. And I think that's that's something to look at, right? Like if you look at your environment and people that are around you, some you can't influence, majority you can influence, some you can't, but you'll start seeing that you're attracting possibly, what and who you are and what matters to you, right? Like if you only care about material things, maybe you're surrounded by people that only care about material things, And I've made a conscious effort to go out and connect with the people I really that inspire me and admire in all areas of life. The people have great relationships with a significant other, like really connect with their kids and have great relationships. The people that are making money but doing it, pursuing a deeper purpose that is like enriching other people's lives. People that are deeply connected to themselves or God or Buddha or like I said, I don't judge any of that, but like that's who I want to be surrounded by and attract into my life. So ask yourself those questions and take down notes on these different like I said, ways to connect and like I said, maybe something stood out at you, but I've never stopped that. And one of the things that I tell people on a weekly basis, I probably sit down with, 3, 4, 5, 10, even 10 times a week, breakfast, lunch with sometimes it's members, sometimes it's friends, sometimes it's people that reach out to me and want to connect. And I think it's one of the most valuable things. People say like, oh, you're giving too much of your time, but it's been one of the biggest strengths in my life to like really connect with people and build these relationships, because they're a lot harder to do, just on the phone or through email or whatnot. And it's also the reason why I still travel a lot, because, if I go and see somebody I care about or go to a seminar with them, it shows that I want to spend time with them. And, there's nothing that you can give somebody else than your time, your energy, your attention, and creating cool experiences with that person. So with that said, I could keep going on about this because like, man, I love this. And this is like really close to my heart. And I think it just enhances your life so much, man. Like every single day, the majority of the things that, make you feel good are usually connected to other people, obviously it's like an internal job, right? It's an internal job. We create happiness by, our virtues and how our perspectives of the world. But think about like, all the things that you love doing. It's usually going to be with people, right? People you care about, people you love. And so without that, there's nothing. So take that into account. Let me know, as always. I'd love, like I said, I'd love a review on iTunes. If you head over there, and as well as like sign up on, like I said, our vlog is essentially our video podcast is on YouTube. Check us out. If you have any questions, shoot them my way at Luka, Luka, at hocevarperformance.com. So my last name, Hocevar performance.com. And, we do Q&A shows pretty often. I love to hear feedback about anything. And I will talk to you soon. I am out. Watch out for the next Vigor Life podcast.